Hello, all. It's always so wonderful to see all of you popping in, and I know that you're here even if I can't see you. I'm Dixie Gillaspie. I am a coach working primarily with business owners and leaders in conscious creation. So really from the position of if you can choose that, you can create it, and moving through the conscious cycle of creation to create anything that you choose. So I've been in this field about 30 years and have no intention of ever quitting. I'm having way too much fun.
Thank you, Dixie. And so today, Dixie's going to be speaking about the root cause of imposter syndrome and how to orient from your true self. And I can say working with Dixie and having the pleasure of collaborating with her, she has so much to share on this that really is going to be able to give you the opportunity to shift out of any fallacy that you may be an imposter into really anchoring yourself in your true self. First, I want to mention Leadership Global, our hosts for today for the Conscious Leadership Roundtable. And this is a monthly immersion session. It includes teaching, coaching, and group facilitation, and it's dedicated to deepening, expanding our leadership presence and abilities. And LeadHERship Global is an amazing organization, and I'd like to start with reading the credo, and then I'm going to ask Carlone to just say a word or two. So the LeadHERship Global credo is: during this time together, we encourage you to cultivate authentic relationships with women around you, so together we rise. Act with courage to pursue your purpose. Dedicate yourself fully to the path you choose and the outcomes you desire. Be curious and open your mind to be a lifetime learner, and to celebrate each other to build meaningful memories and share the love. So that is how we're coming in with our host, LeadHERship Global. Carlone, would you like to say just a few words or just a hello?
Sure. I'm just really happy to be here. I've passed my first month as the new CEO of LeadHERship Global. So I'm at the point where I'm meeting lots of people. I'm seeing lots of familiar faces in here. Hi, Kathy. I saw that little wave. Thank you so much. And I'm just so happy to be here. I'm excited about today's presentation because this subject is one that I think women and probably all humans really have a lot to grow and to gain and to learn from Dixie and from Leezá today. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here.
Absolutely. It's so good to have you. And in our time today, we are inviting you to trust that this is a safe space. This is a place where you can bring to the table the things that are challenging for you, that you want to explore, deepen, ask questions on. We do invite you to either raise your electronic hand, that little button under reactions, or as we said before, raise your hand or unmute. We're casual, we're small enough group that I think we can do that. Again, love to see your faces if you'd love to go on camera. And we'd ask you to practice to listen before responding, to respect time sharing, and respect others' opinions, because we often learn the most from listening to different opinions or viewpoints that are different than our own. And own your experience. So if something comes up for you, please recognize that and please share that. That's part of the consciousness practice, if you will. And if something does come up that you're challenged with, you can share that with Dixie or myself in the chat or later. And we invite you to trust the process. So we have a lot of very interesting, kind, sometimes fiery, curious conversations. And this is the place to really connect at that level with one another in a safe space with respect. So with that, Dixie, is there anything you want to add before you jump on in?
Not so much to add, but to augment.
Okay.
And that is especially when we're talking about leadership and we're talking about something like imposter syndrome, that just reminding all of us that, a safe space, so much of it's about definitions, right? A safe space isn't about a space just where you feel safe. I realize we don't all feel safe having these conversations. And, we get to, as Leezá said, own that experience of, I don't necessarily feel safe, but to remind ourselves that a safe space is a place where we are not harmed. We may feel our stuff, all the feelings, but really, it's a protected space where, you're not going to receive harm. So let's just all of us acknowledge that part of our stuff is that when we feel vulnerable, we often feel threatened. And to separate those two experiences, to be okay feeling vulnerable and not translate it into I'm under threat. So just something to be conscious of as we dive into this topic today, because it can bring up all this stuff, right?
We do, I think we do, all of us together from previous gatherings, we all do a very good job of holding that space for one another. We would like to invite you to just take a moment in the chat box and write 2 words that express how you're coming in today. What's present for you as you're coming in today? Kathy's having fur trouble. Oh no, that's what Colleen said. Okay, humbled and excited. Lovely. Just 2 words that capture what's present for you right now. Ready to learn. Thank you, Stacy. Calm and relaxed. Peggy, nice to see you here. Happy and a bit tired. Lynn, understand that. Open and sponge. Good word. What else? 2 words that capture that. And Dixie and I have all curiosity, compassionate, lovely, connected, and safe. Very nice. Juggling tasks. Yes, understand that, Deborah. So in your time here today, Dixie speaks often about what you want to take with you at the end. I speak to the intention, the experience you want to give to yourself during your time here today. So maybe you want to think about that as well as we're moving through, that you're giving this experience to yourself and sharing yourself with others in the room. So perhaps keep in mind how you'd like to create that for yourself and what you'd like to share with others. And inquisitive and open, regrouping, time management, task management. Okay, very good. Thank you all. Dixie, please. Go ahead.
Beautiful. So I'd like for each of you, as we're sharing a lot of words, to notice how important it is how we define something. Right? You just defined yourself in this moment, just for this little window in time. This is how I define myself. I define myself as open. I define myself as a sponge. I love the sponge because, of course, the only way a sponge does its job is if it's not already saturated, which comes back to a lot of our task management, our time management, our multitasking, that sometimes we feel like our sponge is already so full, we can't possibly absorb anything new, right? So we define ourselves this way. And the topic today of imposter syndrome really is all about how we define ourselves in relationship to what we're seen as or what we are rewarded for. So even how we define imposter syndrome is an interesting thing. You know, it's not a diagnosis. In fact, it wasn't originally explored as a syndrome. That's a word that's come up over and over. It was originally defined as a phenomenon. It's a phenomenon that people experience this feeling of being an imposter, even when, and this is an important understanding about imposter syndrome, when all facts point to the opposite. Imposter syndrome or phenomenon is what happens when we continue to feel and experience ourselves and define ourselves as an imposter, even when there's active proof that we are, in fact, everything that we're made out to be and being rewarded for. So I'm just going to start with a few definitions and some premise and understanding so that we have a shared language around some things. And then what I really would love to unpack is where this deep-seated belief comes in and how we operate outside of that belief that we are, in fact, an imposter. So I've got a few slides that I'm going to share on my screen. We won't spend too long with that because we're going to spend most of it actually in that being together. But let's start with just understanding how we define an imposter. An imposter is simply someone who pretends to be someone else in order to deceive others, especially for fraudulent gain. Now, do any of you actually feel like an imposter right now? No, none of you are people who is pretending to be someone else in order to deceive others for fraudulent gain. So by literal definition, none of you are experiencing yourself as an imposter right this minute. True, I can't see all the heads because, when you share your screen, you only get to see a few people. But I'm guessing all of you are like, no, I'm not an imposter when it's defined that way, right? So where do we have this experience, this phenomenon, this syndrome, this whatever we want to call it, that we are in fact an imposter and not deserving of whatever gain we're getting? So gain could be, gee, I was rewarded with a job title and some responsibilities. And that is, in fact, a reward. And I'm not worthy of it. I don't deserve it because I am not the person who deserves it, right? Or it's I'm giving you a raise, or I'm giving you an award, recognition. It's that feeling of, I'm not the person who earned that. I'm not the person who deserves that. And yet, when you read the definition of imposter, none of you are. So really, this comes from a deep-seated belief, the belief in I am not. I am not. So the imposter syndrome is a deeply stabilized belief that we are not what we need to be to deserve the reward we're offered. I'm just not. See, it's really not. We can have all kinds of doubts. We can have actually some very well-founded beliefs that say, I'm not sure I'm qualified. I used to laugh and say, I've never taken a job I was qualified for. I got qualified within the first couple of months, but taking a job I was already qualified for just wasn't enough of a challenge. And then I just quit taking jobs. I saw one of the people that was actually featured in the movie, The Secret. I was at an event where she was the headliner for the event. So I got to hear her speak, and I loved it. Tamara just says, say yes and figure it out. If it's what you want, say yes and figure it out. So sometimes we know darn well we said yes and we still have to figure it out, right? That isn't where imposter syndrome comes from. In fact, imposter syndrome will absolutely keep you from saying yes and figuring it out. You feel the difference? When we're really in this I am inherently an imposter who does not deserve, who's fraudulently faking my qualifications and my worthiness, you don't have that say yes and figure it out available to you. You're going to say no even to things that you absolutely could rock if you just said yes to it, right? So it's a deeply stabilized belief that we are not what we need to be in order to deserve the reward that we're offered. So really, at its core, imposter syndrome is an identity level belief, not a circumstantial belief or a situational belief. It's about who we think we are, not what we actually think we can do or what we can learn or what we already know. It's really not our abilities. It's our identity that we doubt when we have this imposter syndrome. I am an imposter because I am not. And so I want to talk a little bit about what we often call the core wounded beliefs. And there's a lot of study. It goes back, if any of you have studied the Enneagram, you know that this understanding goes back thousands and thousands of years. But it's really understanding that at some point, as we come into the realization that we're separate beings, we're no longer pure spirit, we're no longer connected to another body inside of another body, we're individuals, that we start needing to explain to ourselves why we don't just have everything. We just come up with, we make up stories about why we're separate. And these stories tend to fall in different categories of I'm not enough. So maybe I'm not strong enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not fast enough, right? So we have all these I'm not fill in the blank enough. It's an identity belief. One might be I'm not good. Literally, I'm not good enough, not meaning I'm not good enough at something. I'm not a good enough person. I'm not holy enough. I'm not selfless enough. I'm just not good. Right? I do not belong. I don't belong. I don't belong to my family. I don't belong to my community. We even see so many children now, and it's heartbreaking. I don't belong on this planet. There's no place for me here. Identity beliefs of I just don't belong here in a body on a planet, right? I'm not significant. The belief that no matter what I do, doesn't matter. Nobody cares, right? I am not significant. I don't matter. My opinion doesn't matter. Nothing I do will ever matter. Identity beliefs. I'm not perfect, right? For some people, that's just a darn it, I'm not perfect. For some people, that's a deep-seated identity belief that says I'm not perfect. And that means I can't have what I want, right? Or I'm not capable. I simply don't have the capability. Notice this isn't a situational, I'm not capable of that. It's just an identity, I'm not capable, period. What all of these beliefs come down to, y'all, is that you have to be these things in order to. So we go back to understanding imposter syndrome just through the lens of it's a deep-seated, hyper-stabilized belief that we are not what we need to be in order to deserve the reward that we're offered. Right? Here are your deep-seated beliefs that most of us orient from at some point in our lives. Now, one of the beautiful things, Leezá and I had a great conversation before we brought this, to all of you, and that there are some cultures where these deep-seated beliefs are not the orientation. So while every one of us, through that process of learning that we're separate, will make up stories about why we don't have what we want, in certain cultural environments, we don't orient from them. It's just not a thing. We just kind of go, yeah, I've kind of got this idea that maybe I'm not good, but everything is still together. And I know my place in the world and in my community, and I feel whole. So there's certainly cultures that literally cultivate an experience of wholeness. So while this is a belief, it's not a functioning operating structure. There's a big difference between having a belief and functioning or orienting out of that belief, right? So will we ever get rid of these beliefs? Not necessarily. Do we need to? Not necessarily. That's what I really want to talk about today. So we'll get out of this share. I'll come back to practices when we finish. There we go. So that's just a little foundation for all of us to look at as we really step into the when do I experience imposter syndrome? Why do I experience imposter syndrome? And more importantly, how do I not experience imposter syndrome? So we talk about beliefs. There are things that we believe to be true because we've seen it in action. I kind of believe in gravity. If I stop believing in gravity, you'll probably read about it on the news because it won't end well, right? There are beliefs that we have about other people that, and the world that we'll never prove. So while I can prove gravity, there are beliefs that we all hold. I call it the personal identity narrative, the stories we tell ourselves about other people in our world and how that relates to us, right? We all have those beliefs. There's no proving or disproving most of them, but they're not necessarily hyper-stabilized beliefs. Those beliefs change as we go through our life. My father had some fairly deeply held beliefs. He was raised in the middle of Kansas. You can imagine what some of those beliefs were, and he changed them. Bless his heart, it wasn't easy, but he changed those. Our hyper-stabilized beliefs, however, are more difficult to change. Having negative identity belief can cause identity disorder. Thank you for the question, Arka. I don't see any of this actually as a disorder. We just have a structure. Sometimes the structure functions really well. Sometimes the structure doesn't, right? I see some people that one structure of identity and beliefs, and I kind of lump all that into a structure. That's kind of talk about definitions and words, right? That's the way that I see everything, is everything functions in a structure, which is just two or more parts that are in a structure together to create an outcome. So, you could say the cup and my hand are in a structure together. When I put it down, they're not, right? So every belief that we have not only is a belief, it forms part of our personal structure, if that makes sense. So we can have, here's the beautiful thing about humans, we can hold two opposing beliefs in the same structure. We're powerful like that. We can hold two opposing beliefs in the same structure. Does that make sense? Because negative beliefs and thoughts about identity can cause identity distortion, deflection of identity from its original position. Original position is actually where we're going with this. So I can't see you, Arka, because you got your camera on, but this thumbs up is for you. That's exactly where we want to come back to, is orienting from true self, the truth of who you are. And the truth of who you are, if you go back to those identity beliefs, is that you are actually all of those things. You absolutely are worthy. You are good enough. You are enough. You do belong. You are significant, right? When we're in our original position, then all of those things that we believe we aren't, we know are not true. So, yeah. By the way, definitions, I think of negative and positive probably a little differently. I don't really hold an absolute when it comes to negative or positive. For me, negative, it detracts, it subtracts. Any idea that you have, belief that you have, thought that you have, that subtracts, that diminishes, just like math, it's a negative, right? It subtracts. Anything that is additive of what you choose. For me, better is always, there's more love in it, right? So if it adds what I love, it adds love to the world, I call it positive. So I don't work with negative and positive probably the same way we often mean it. But you think about that. Our identity beliefs that say I'm not this and I'm not that literally subtract, detract, they diminish you. The beliefs that say I absolutely am capable and I do belong are additive. So we can, even in my language, we can call this positive and negative. So the beautiful thing about being able to hold two beliefs as true, and I see a couple people here that were actually in my group session this morning, or was it yesterday I did the session on beliefs. Can't remember if it's this. I've done so many sessions this week, that because we can hold two positions as true or two beliefs as true, here's what I really want to get into today, is it's about which one you work with, which one we say orient from, which one you choose as an operating principle for what you create. So for instance, if I have a deeply held orientation that has explained the things I didn't have in my life through, I'm just not significant. It just don't really matter. I'm not really that important in the grand scheme of things, and nothing I do or say is going to make that much difference. And I really have things I want to create in the world and change that I want to be in the world, but I'm not significant enough to do it. I will tell you that can, in a 14-year-old girl, lead to deciding not to be on this planet, because I tried that. Luckily, I'm harder to kill than I thought I would be. But I tried that. And it really came from a deep-seated, hyper-stabilized belief that I was not significant. And I could see the things I wanted to change in the world, and I saw absolutely no hope of being able to change any of them. And I was like, yeah, I don't need to live the rest of this life if this is how it's going to be. That belief, I will tell you, still pops up. it still exists. Every now and then there's this feeling, and I've learned to notice, recognize the feeling of, I'm just not significant. I just don't carry enough weight in the world, right? But alongside of that belief is a belief that I'm significant enough to create change, that I'm significant enough that in 1 or 2 or 3 or 300, and it doesn't matter, lives, I can make a difference. Those beliefs coexist. Who I am today is because I chose to orient out of the new belief of I am absolutely significant, instead of orienting out of that limited belief that says I'm not significant enough to make a difference. Does that make sense? Checking on the chat. Belief, knowing of our value and worth are not positive, but rather innate truths. So I love that, because this is the difference between what is true and what we experience as true. And those are often two different things, aren't they? It doesn't make a lot of difference if something is real, if we refuse to experience it as real. If I refuse to experience gravity as real, I might very well take the last leap of faith I will ever take. Because I'm going to act out of what I believe and what I allow myself to experience, not out of what's true. We create our own truth of reality because we create our own experience of reality. So absolutely, a belief in whether or not something's an innate truth, I am significant, for instance, doesn't need to be positive. But once I believe it, the belief itself adds to my life, adds to my experience, even though it was innately true before. We are all the predominant creators of our lived experience. But if we don't experience ourselves that way, we don't live that way, then we don't create from there, right? Yeah, there is nothing absolute truth. Truth is relative, subjective matter. We could get into definitions again, but here's what is where I keep those straight in my head. There are facts. Fact, if I jump out of a 21st story window, I'm probably going to end up dead. Fact, right? And then there's what we hold as true, which is not an absolute, right? Our truth can always receive new information.
Dixie,
yeah, self-esteem, positive belief.
I just wanted to share something on that point Arca brings up about a subjective truth, because when we use the word truth, it can get murky for some people. And so I tend to lean more toward reality, and objective reality, which you're speaking about, is, fact, although quantum physics is also proving that there is no objective reality, right? That's a whole nother conversation we could have. But if we talk about the facts, we can commonly agree the light is on, my hair is brown, Dixie's wearing a silver necklace, right? We can say these are facts and we commonly agree upon those. And we can orient toward those as an objective reality, or a reality we all can share. Then there's a subjective reality. There's an experience we all have personally of those facts, of that outside reality. And that's where that imposter phenomenon, that belief, comes in, because we think if we're not good enough, it's not an internal experience. That objective reality out there has established that as a fact. And so we turn to that objective reality saying, oh no, look, my father said this, my boss said that, my income says this. That proves, that outside fact proves this internal experience, which is not so. We use that outside information as proof of whatever belief we're holding, which is, I believe, where Dixie's going with these, which one are we going to hold? So I just want to clarify that relationship. Does that help any?
Yeah, that is so, we talked about augmenting. That's exactly what that does. Because that's exactly where I want the conversation today to blossom, is that we can, because we can hold two truths, two beliefs that are actually contradictory. We can hold them both as true. We have a choice then of choosing a new belief. And this is where the power comes in. This is where the power comes in, is if you could choose a belief of I am significant, for instance, and it doesn't need to be exactly opposite, but if you could choose a belief, then act out of that belief, you start to stabilize that belief. And that's exactly what Leezá was explaining. As we stabilize that new belief, we start getting more and more reinforcement of this new belief. I think of them a little like trees. If the belief that we developed to explain why we didn't just automatically get everything like we did when we were in the womb, if that belief has been growing for, 30, 40, for some of us like 60 years, it's got roots. That's what we mean by hyper stabilized. It's got roots. This new belief that you're starting to own is a little tree. It's a little tree. It needs for you to take action in alignment with it, for it to become rooted, to become hyper stabilized. But the more you take action out of that new belief, the more reinforcement you get that it's true, the more nurturing it gets, the deeper those roots go. And when the other isn't tended, it atrophies. What you do not give energy to dies. So we stop orienting or taking action out of the old belief, even though it may still be there. It may be going, hey, but wait a minute, remember? You're not significant. You don't belong. You're not perfect. What the heck do you think you're doing taking that job or taking on that challenge or receiving that reward? And you just smile and say, I see you. And I also see this belief. Which am I going to choose? Which am I going to choose? Our power is in that choice. So we keep feeding that belief that says I am, instead of feeding the belief that says I'm not. We start to notice when the action we're starting to take or the little behaviors that we have during the day are aligned to what I am, as opposed to aligned to what I'm not. Right? For a lot of us, that looks like speaking up, sharing in chat. How many times do you not contribute because you're like, I'm not an expert on that? Yeah. Or, I'm not the one that should be sharing on this. Or every time I've tried to share on something like this, I found out, yeah, I really didn't belong. Everybody else had a different opinion. So probably I should have kept mine to myself. Those are those little behaviors that just make the roots of that old tree deeper and deeper and deeper. Whereas when you can step into I may be the only one with this opinion, but I'm absolutely going to share it. Because even if nobody recognizes it, it might touch someone else. I hold principles that are different from a lot of personal development executive coaches. And for a long time, I was like, I'm in the middle of a bunch of people talking about beliefs and mindset. And I just want to remind everybody, I love the way Robert Fritz says it. He says, but we're not in the belief game. We're in the creation game. And so I would because I would be in this group of people that were all talking about how important mindset and beliefs, we got to eliminate all the limiting beliefs. And I'm sitting here going, no, really, I've gotten a lot of what I wanted. I haven't eliminated my limiting beliefs. I just don't work with them anymore. Like, I just laugh at them now and go on, but they're still there. And now, because I think nobody may agree with me. Nobody may tell me they agree with me. It may be 2 years from now that somebody hears a Robert Fritz video and hears him say, But we're not in the belief game. We're in the creation game. And suddenly it clicks. But it clicks because I said something or posted a comment. Which one are you living out of, right? Which one are you creating out of? Or as we say, which one are you orienting out of? So I want to just have that conversation about how we can first notice, am I creating out of an operating principle, program, orientation of what I'm not? Because if you're creating out of what you think you're not, then you're creating more of what you're not. That's just how energy works. You're just feeding that established belief. How can you notice when you're taking little behaviors? And I'm not even talking about what we usually think of as action. Boy, we're hooked on action, aren't we? We're so hooked on action, especially if it's massive. We got things about massive action. I will tell you, the little repeated behaviors are what make massive action easy. Because it's those little repeated behaviors that tell us who we are. It's the little behaviors that are the most powerful communication we will ever have in that feedback loop to ourselves. You know, when I get out of bed every morning and decide to brush my teeth, I'm a person who takes care of my health. If I get out of bed every morning going, I don't know, I'm only going to be on Zoom today, so, you know, my breath really doesn't matter, so I don't know that I really need to brush my teeth. That's also communication back to self, right? So it's those little consistent behaviors that establish who we think we are, our identity. You know, and when we really notice the behaviors that align with the identity we choose, we actually never have imposter syndrome. Because if we are absolutely living out of, orienting out of the chosen belief that I am, as Leezá says, it's innate. I can't not belong. I was born into human family. I belong to a family of humans and a particular family of humans. And as she says, quantumly, that's just true. You can't exit the entangled field of your family, which is in the family of humans. You innately belong. There's no way around it. You are innately significant. You have as much power to create change in the world as any other human being. You are innately created perfect. Now, everything you do may not be perfect. Everything I do is not perfect, but who's judging perfect? You were innately created perfect. So all of those things that we develop this belief of I'm not, therefore, if I'm rewarded, I must be an imposter, are illusions. They're truths that we decide to work from, but they're not innately true, right? So we're going to, yay that, you belong, you are perfect. Yes, all of that. You can probably tell, Arka, that Leezá and I have both done that study and that work as well. And we can't cram all of it into a 90-minute session when what we really want is for all of you to have the opportunity to unpack this together and to discuss this together and have your own moments of, oh, there's that. Because really, you know, conscious anything, conscious creation, conscious leadership, just living a conscious life is about bringing it into conscious space. What we notice, and especially what we can notice together as a group and what we can bring, elevate into something that's conscious that you can see, becomes something that you can choose what you're going to do with what you see. Until then, it's living in unconscious space. We don't have a lot of power in unconscious space. But when you get it into conscious awareness, when you notice, then you have all kinds of power. I always say noticing is the superpower, because once it's noticed, you can choose it or change it. You have that power at that point. Until then, you have no power. So what we want to do is go into breakout sessions and have a conversation, what I'd love for you to do is to notice the times of your life that you have operated out of or oriented out of. What is your true self? When you've acted as the, yes, I belong. Yes, I'm significant. Yes, I was absolutely created perfect. Yes, I absolutely am enough. I would love for each of you to share a moment, an experience when you know you were acting out of that truth. And then notice a time that you were acting out of what you believe you aren't. When did you not take an action because of what you believed you weren't? When did you shrink from being noticed or recognized or rewarded? Or when did you have that, yes, I accepted the reward and I'm so terrified somebody's going to find out that I didn't deserve it, right? Somebody's going to uncover that I'm really an imposter. So I'd like time for each of you to share both, but I want you to start with the first thing that you share, because boy, we're wired to go to the negative, literally, what is less than. So I want to reinforce, I want you to go first to the, what's a time that I operated out of my true self? And then what's a time that I operated out of my limited self, out of what I believed I'm not, and experienced myself as an imposter? So are we ready with breakout rooms?
We are, and I put the, oh, Kathy says she has to drop off. Okay, I put the 2 requests in the chat box if you all want to copy that or just make note of that. And Deborah says she can't break out.
Yes, so. Deborah shared earlier that I think her audio isn't working.
Oh, okay, yeah. All right. Okay,
but Deborah, if you wanted to be in a breakout room and just use chat, that would probably be okay too. Your choice.
And Colleen is leaving us, so thank you.
Yeah, Colleen has her board meeting to get to.
Okay. All right. Well then, here we go. And we are giving them how long, Dixie?
20 minutes. We'll be fine at 20 minutes.
Okay. All righty. So here we go. Deborah said she couldn't.
She's driving. It's really funny. I actually was able to translate that. So we can pop.
Terry's
Terry maybe up with Dan and Peggy.
Yeah, move to 2. Let's do that. Okay, there we go. So we have just 2 rooms there. All right, and Arca has not joined yet. Arca, I don't know if you can still hear us, but you should have an invitation to join breakout room 1.
Yeah, and if somebody has to step away, I usually just put them back in the waiting room so we can see.
I got to run, ladies. Thank you so much. This has been so amazing. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks for coming on and getting us started. And welcome. I haven't seen or talked to you since the official transition. So.
I know. We'll have to do a meeting. I'd love to hear more thoughts of how I can support the Conscious Leadership Roundtable. I think what y'all are doing is just amazing.
Well, and I'd love to know more about you and your background. So we'll do that sometime. But thanks for being here.
Good. Awesome. Thank you, ladies. Have a great one. Bye.
Okay, I think Arca may have stepped away. All right. Well, folks are going to be popping back here whether they want to or not, because those rooms are closing in seconds. I see furry ears. I love it. We get attendance from the fur family as well.
Lynn, we can see one furry ear at the bottom of your screen. You're muted.
You're muted. Oh, no, we got to see a nose and eyes.
That is Sweet Stanley.
Hello, Sweet Stanley. You're adorable.
That's a little one.
Yeah. He said, my sister Stella is sleeping, so I thought I'd sit in on the meeting.
Nice. Well, I'm glad you could.
Good.
He's a sweet boy.
Well, so welcome back.
You guys have my partner in the breakout room had to leave, but I got her email, but I didn't get her last name and I didn't write it down to her. Her first name is Liz. you guys?
Um,
She's from Milwaukee.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm looking up through the chats. If you look up in chat, no, Milwaukee.
is
Look
Luckett,
at
Luckett.
Luckett.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to introduce her to Dr. Shakina Williams at Babson, who runs the Center for Women's Entrepreneurial Leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's got talk about a success story. She's got a program. They set their goal to run 200 women business owners through in 2 years. They did 192 the first year.
Fantastic. This is what happens when we put a stake in the ground.
Honest to God, I said, I want what she's having. I mean,
well,
yeah,
you've got what she's having. That's the beautiful thing.
I'm getting it by osmosis, I think so.
So how did everyone go with your discussion? What came out of that? I saw Dan nod, but you're still muted, Dan.
So Leezá and Dixie, the funny thing about imposter syndrome, basically only successful people seem to have it attack them. Very unsuccessful people aren't usually prone to imposter syndrome, or people that are kind of along the game. They're not. Right.
Well, when you define imposter syndrome as the phenomenon was originally defined before it was a syndrome. The phenomenon was originally defined as having a feeling of being a fake or a fraud in the face of evidence that you aren't. So absolutely, what we see as successful people are the ones that are going to experience it because they're the ones that are in the face of evidence to the contrary. The interesting thing that I find in coaching a lot of people that will tell me that one of their biggest challenges is imposter syndrome is that it isn't a challenge to being successful. They find ways to be successful. They just never really accept, own, or enjoy their success. They always have this sinking feeling that the rug's going to be pulled out from under them and they're going to fall off the edge of the cliff, or somebody's going to tap them on the shoulder and say, yeah, you're not all that. And all it takes for them to have one really miserable day is for somebody to comment, oh, you think, you're all that. I have one person that she's had so much success, and she does often post about how grateful she is for her success. And she recently lost her fiance to a sudden heart attack, and tragic. Somebody actually posted, oh, you say you're always so grateful. Nobody can be that grateful 100% of the time. How grateful are you now? And that's pretty devastating.
Yeah, that's pretty wicked.
And at the same time, she's done so much just self-recognition of recognizing that imposter syndrome is a lot of the reason that she drives herself so hard. That, a lot of the reason those people have so much success is they are always trying to prove that they're not an imposter, that they're never really enjoying the fruits of their success because the imposter belief is at an identity level. So they can't prove it because that would completely void their identity, right? But the beautiful thing was to watch her say, there was a time that not only would that have been cruel and wrong, I would have just quit posting about being grateful. Like it would have changed my behavior. And now I can just see, no, it's not a fake to say I'm grateful all the time. Because even in the midst of this, I'm grateful for the time we had. And it's a very different experience of life and success.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Absolutely.
So one of the things for me, as you were just recounting that, I'm thinking when you train salespeople, you train them to overcome objections. And that's all that was that. I think sometimes people do things like that person who made that sort of really snarky comment or post is because they want to be proven wrong. So I am still grateful. Yes, I do believe there are reasons. And so if we fold, then we never overcome their objection. Does that make sense? I mean,
it does, but here's the first thing I would love for all of us to do is notice when we're not overcoming our own objections.
mm,
Because so much of it, and Dan's absolutely right. There are so many really high profile executives that I know that they'll tell me, yeah, but I deal with imposter syndrome every day. That imposter syndrome has actually become to some extent an addiction because it's the energy from the imposter syndrome that keeps driving them for higher performance.
And there's also
never fill the bucket.
There's the flip side of the coin, which I think is actually more negative and devastating to a business. And that's a manager who thinks he's far better or she is far more competent and capable than they are.
So there's a phenomenon for that too, and we could go into that, the Dunning-Kruger effect, and yet that's just another compensation for an identity structure. And I don't know which one is more devastating for the business. I could argue either side of that, but ultimately they're both devastating for humanity.
There's a facet of this that I'd like to speak to, and it's what I call internal and external orientation. So when we are internally oriented, when we are using the belief systems that serve us well, meaning that they recognize our value, they are aligned with our true nature, if you will. When we orient in that place, if we have a comment like your friend who had that comment on social media, when we have a comment that's coming from outside, it's not as difficult, if even difficult at all, to be able to say, I hear that's your perspective, but it doesn't relate to me because I'm anchored within myself in my own personal experience, knowing my value. What happens, and we're trained in the Western world, and as some of you may know, I'm grateful to be able to walk in an indigenous community, not being Native myself, that most people in the Western colonized world have been taught to see themselves from outside themselves, looking back. How do I look? How do I sound? What are people saying about me? Just social media in itself. How many likes do I have? What kind of impact do I think I have given the criteria that I've been told is important in the world? And so I then look at that I orient externally for my internal value, which in itself, it doesn't work, because if there's 6 people in this room, there are 6 Leezás in this room. Absolutely. Each one of you has a completely different experience of me, opinion, what you think I am, how you think I appear, and so forth. What's important for me is to know that how I'm coming forward to serve you all is from that internal place of knowing my value and what I can offer here. From when we're in that place, there can be no sense of imposter because you know yourself in the end.
Mm-hmm.
What happens then in leadership positions is when I'm going to now serve or support or guide or lead, whatever words we want to use for that experience, I do have to check into my externals, into people's perspectives, into their experience, needs, wants, frustrations, performance, and so forth, and look at things from their perspective. But I don't get lost in that. I add that, as Dixie was saying, we can hold multiple things, not only beliefs. I add that information to what I already know, and I see how can they work together. So, and in my communication, I can speak. I hear this is what's going on for you. I see that you're having difficulty with this, or I'm noticing that you may need this. Is that right? So I can orient outside. I listen to that information. I take in what their comments are. Then I come back to internal orientation. How does that land with me? Do I feel that's appropriate? Do I want to do that? Does that align with my values? Can I do that? Am I capable of that? And that dance, the Cree call that kakisimuin, dancing with the universe. It's not only with others, but also with a higher power, whichever we have, however we perceive that for ourselves. And how do we dance with all of that together? And that's the consciousness. So I don't know if that helps, Dan, what you were saying about, and Dixie, you said it right on, whether we think that we're better than everybody or we think we're not good enough. it's the flip side of the same coin.
Mm-hmm.
So I have two comments, Leezá. Something for you to look at with your wonderful heritage is a poem by a guy named Rick Maston. His first name is R.I.C., and the late Rick Maston. He does a poem called "Let It Be a Dance." And actually, if you would actually love it, it's exactly what you just were talking about. And actually, if you put your email in the chat for me, I'll send it to you. He was my neighbor in Big Sur. And so, which was wonderful. And the other thing, and then I'll be quiet here. The other thing is, are any of you watching the Geography of Bliss? That Rainn, who was Dwight on The Office, Rainn Wilson, he's going to 10 locations looking for what makes people happy inside, and it's called the Geography of Bliss. Typically, it comes on Sunday night. So he went first to Iceland, and then to Bulgaria, and then to Thailand, and then to Los Angeles. And I think there was one other one in there. So he's got 5 more to go to. But he is looking for, in Bulgaria, he went because they're almost at the bottom of the EU, and people are not necessarily happy. There's a lot of graft and corruption, I guess, in every country, but certainly in that one. And he still found people who were happy, who were comfortable with who they were, who saw their worth, that kind of thing. And he's doing that on that show. And it's the best show that I've seen on television in years. It's wonderful. So
Thank you, Lynn. And I'll just share this and then I'll also be quiet. I had shared up above a link to a book called The Continuum Concept, written by Jean Vidloff, who was a
good
journalist. And she spoke to this, Dixie. If you haven't read that, you would really love it as well. She spent time with the Yaquana Nation in South America on the Amazon. And she went through first as a journalist, then she sold everything in Britain and went back and lived with them because she was so impacted by how happy these people were. And not happy with haha, they just were at peace. They were comfortable. Their children were happy. There was just something very different than the rest of the world. And so she made a study of it. The rest of her life was on that. And she also did a study in Bali and it really came down to how are they with their children, just recognizing the value of their children, and their whole culture revolves around those children growing up in an environment where they know their value. There is no disvaluing. There's no not belonging. It just doesn't exist. So
that's what I meant by where we orient from. You know, if we had the benefit of that kind of culture and upbringing where there's no need to orient from limitation. There's no need to orient from what you aren't, because what you are is reinforced in all aspects of the culture. But it's also true, you know, it's a concept of growing yourself back up. Another book that I really appreciated, of creating for yourself what you didn't have in your upbringing. And we can create that for ourselves. Arca, we record all of it for LeadHERship Global, but only the part before the breakout is ever shared. So they distribute the teaching part, the part before our breakout session. This part, if you watch those recordings, is not part of it. So yeah, the discussion isn't something that's shared. Yeah. And then if I'm in charge of remembering to start the recording again, sometimes it isn't even recorded. Oops. Told you I wasn't perfect. What else came out of your discussion before we wrap up? Anything else that came up?
I think circumstance has so much to do with the whole game, right? We've got mom, family, early education, culture norm, institutional norm, political norm, and we're literally downloaded all these beliefs. And so really, I think for me, the journey has been, how do I uncover those? But what's been more interesting for me in my journey is, what were the experiences? How far back could I go to really remember And how was that a frame of reference? And I was talking with Peggy about how my life experience by the time I was 11 was how independent I was for my own security. And that created a life out there of experimenting, a life of adventure, a life of not trusting others, a life, and there were all these different flavors that came into it, you know, and without, I think, that acknowledgement of those things, I wouldn't really understand where a lot of my reaction came from or a lot of my belief. And I think that's really some interesting work, is to not only to uncover the belief, but where did it come from? What was the experience? What was the emotion and the memory? Where is it sitting somatically? And now as an adult, is my adult Dan driving the bus, or is my wounded 7-year-old boy driving the bus?
Well, it's whoever you put in the driver's seat, Dan.
And I'm having conversations with people and I go, well, is that your 5-year-old girl, or is that you, the woman? And it's connecting with people and they're like, what? And I'm like, so which one are you? And there's sort of a permission now to kind of have this connectivity that I'm really enjoying. And it's dropping the mask game, which I think in leadership, we're going to be conscious leaders. If we're not willing to drop the mask, how can we ask anybody else?
And notice that it's part of human experience to create masks. So everyone that we're surrounded by is also wearing theirs. And it didn't all, there's another wonderful book I recommend highly that's really based on the work of Bert Hellinger, but it didn't start with you. And recognizing that even some of those things, like we can be so curious about where did it actually start, but this is, you talk about truth and facts. We won't know the facts because so much of where it actually started was pre-self-consciousness, when the unconscious was everything, or it may have started in generations past. When we really look at where did it start, Bert Hellinger's research takes trauma markers back 7 generations, obviously goes back further, but that's how far back we could trace the ancestral stories that aligned with the trauma. But just knowing that we inherit those stories. The other thing is there's what I think of as like parallel memories. We create memories out of our imagination that never took place in actual events. And then we create beliefs out of those imaginative memories that we had of what's the worst thing that could happen. And if we imagine it strongly enough, our brain thinks it did happen. And the next thing you know, you've got a root cause in a memory of an event that didn't take place. Where our ability to create is infinite. And it's just incredible to me. But here's the thing, and I know I just got to know we're getting close. One thing I would love for y'all to think about, and then I want your closing thoughts, is that when we get this idea of, well, wait a minute, I've carried these beliefs all of my life. For some of us, that's been a few years. Can I really create new beliefs? The thing I remind myself all the time is, if you want proof that you can create new beliefs, remember that the beliefs that you now hold as obvious, you didn't used to believe at all. Like every belief we have, we created our version of it, even if we inherited it from someone else. So we absolutely, all of us, are powerful enough to create new beliefs. So the biggest challenge in the wrap up, I'll just show the screen real quick, and then I am finished, is this invitation. We always try to give you some invitations for suggestive practices, just so that you have a way to, well, okay, great. That was a great discussion and information. What do I do with it? Here's my suggestive practices for this work. Notice how you're defining yourself in others. Are you defining yourself in others as the I am not, they are not? Or are you really defining yourself as your true self, right? Consciously choose new beliefs and create behaviors that reinforce them. So like, creating a belief that my viewpoint is valid and significant, and then you choosing behaviors that align with that, and then validate the experiences of I am that. I am significant. I am perfect. I do belong. I am. those are my suggested practices. And that's it for me. So the rest of you have anything that you want to share, or Leezá can take us home. We got about 5 minutes.
Well, I just want to say on the back end of that is that validating, make it verbal. So when you recognize that I am, say it to someone, write it down, draw a picture, like put it into some sort of physical, experiential form to anchor that validation of all of the things that you are, all of your value and goodness.
Leezá, I was going to, and everyone, I was just going to tell you on NPR the other day, they were talking about art, and they said art is the words we cannot say. So when you talk about driving a picture, isn't that lovely? Yeah.
Love that.
While we're doing book recommendations, if you're familiar with Jeff Tweedy's work, and Jeff Tweedy is a musician that went from Uncle Tupelo, which was with Jeff, what's the other guy's name? Can't think of it right now, who then went and formed Sunvolt, and then Jeff Tweedy went and formed Wilco. But he wrote this fabulous book called How to Write One Song. And one of my clients sent it to me and said, this is everything that you teach us in your intuitive writing and intuitive work. It's just, he calls it something different, but it's the same process, isn't it? And I read it. I'm like, whoa, it really is. But the How to Write One Song. And one of the things that he says is truth always comes out in art. Truth always comes out in art. And I love that. If there's no other reason to write, to paint, to create music, because truth will come out.
I have a little something that I would like to share with you all. On that note,
this is actually my favorite part. It's like all the book recommendations and
this
fun
is
tools, and
you can see this.
Yeah,
that is a statue from Burning Man, and it's called Truth is Beauty. It's about, I don't know, 6 or 7 stories high. It's huge. And if I may, I'm going to read the back of this, and I invite you all to put in the chat or share also how you're feeling right now, what you're bringing. But this is a little something I wrote. Know your goodness and beauty. Rest in your strength. Speak your truth without fear. You have nothing to lose, but everything to gain by being you, lit up and authentic. Stand only for being treated in reflection of your pristine worth. Delight in being yourself. Cherish yourself fully, fiercely, passionately, with zero apology. Love is your nature. Beauty is your truth. Live in full color and love out loud. You being you is a gift to us all.
The truth will come out in art.
Beauty. So would you like to share either out loud or in the chat box how you're feeling now? 2 words, a sentence after this incredible exploration with Dixie on, I'm going to say, the fallacy of the imposter phenomenon. What's present for you right now as you're leaving? We can do it out loud, verbally, if you'd like. Small group.
So Leezá,
I feel happier than when I came in. I'm sorry, Dan. I mean, interrupt.
Yeah, so I was going to say, I actually feel appreciation, and there's a glow and an aliveness. And I would urge you to get new photos of yourselves, because you are far more alive and beautiful than that slide. And so, I just treasure the time.
Dan. Peggy, Arca?
I just enjoy the insights. I really enjoy them and try to figure out how to apply them.
Beautiful.
You know, application always starts with noticing. It's just such a magical thing. Just notice and then choose. Arca, I know you've been off camera and mute, but chat, or if you want to jump on, just an invitation.
And as we're waiting, I'm going to say I feel excited that I get the opportunity to not only have these times with you, but also to prepare them with Dixie. It's like I get like a double shot of espresso, you know, when you go to by working with Dixie. And I feel very humbled that you all come with your hearts and that you share really as openly as we've invited you to. Thank you for that.
I think working with Leezá is so much that proof of when you step into something to create it with intention, it becomes what you intended, because you all just show up and give us that gift. Like, this is what was so magical about Leezá and I introducing ourselves, and both of us going, I don't know, do we want to create this thing together? Who are you? I don't know. Who are you? And learning that whatever paths we come to the work from, we come to the same place. And we had a really clear intention for this. And then you all just show up and you just like hand us this gift of, yeah, this is exactly what we intended. This is what we knew we would love. It's rich. It's really rich.
I do have one question for you guys. In your work, are you finding that the world of disruption is creating a future of what a CEO is going to be different than what we currently have? And are you exploring that in your work?
I can give you a quick answer to that. Although, Dan, you always ask these questions about it the full hour.
I know. I'm hoping that you'll actually spend an hour on this topic, because I think it's really
next time we just might.
So why don't you actually, Dan, that would be great. If you send an email, I can integrate that, what I'm going to be presenting next time and sharing with you all. If you would put that in an email to me, that question,
yeah,
we can definitely do that. But I'm going to answer it. I'm just going to answer it shortly. And that is, what's being required by this disruption is that everybody knows their true value, exactly what Dixie's been talking about. That's the only way anybody's going to be able to lead anything moving forward. So all of the blustering and the pompousness and whatever it is we've put on to get us to where we are and to try and, shoulder our way through, it's not going to work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Just not.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, very much the same. And it's funny because I was thinking in November I might speak on, actually it's a client's work, but I'm doing work with her, and I'm actually the first certified person to use the work because we're creating the certification program together. But the book is The Human Team. And one of the things that she and I've been exploring is an HBR article that I found from 2014. And this guy was very farsighted because it hasn't happened yet, but it is happening. And he called it the human economy, with the understanding that each economy is named for what is of value, right? So the agricultural value economy was based on the value of what was grown in the fields. And then you had the industrial economy, which was based on what could be produced on the line and so on. And so his point in 2014 was that we would come into a human economy where what would be valuable was the value of human itself. Mm-hmm. And it's very much what Jeanette and I are co-creating, and, where we stand on what's really valuable. And I believe through a lot of what you just referenced, Dan, that what we're seeing is a value structure starting to emerge where our very humanness is at the core of what is valuable. And Jeanette and I call it the human-driven economy rather than the human economy. We're not trading in humans, but it is driven by our humanity. And as AI continues to rise, the counterbalance to that has to be our humanness. So there's my short answer with more to come. Beautiful. And we only went 3 minutes over, even with Dan throwing a spanner in the works, which we love.
All right. Friends, thank you for your time. We look forward to seeing you next time, and be well until then.
Yes. Bye-bye all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.